Coming up on Network Africa, Algeria confirms its first case of coronavirus. Egypt holds military funeral for former President Hosni Mubarak in the capital, Cairo. Plus, Cameroon to rerun election in 11 Anglophone areas. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. The Algerian health minister has confirmed the country's first case of the coronavirus. In an announcement on state-owned ENTV, the minister Abdelrahman Ben Bouzdi said the patient is an Italian man who arrived in the country on February the 17th. Algeria becomes the second African country with a confirmed case of COVID-19. Egypt was the first to report a confirmed case of the disease, but later announced that the patient had been declared clear of the infection and was on the way to recovery. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is seeking the help of Chinese President Xi Jinping for students in the city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. Mr. Abiy said he was pleased that after a telephone call with Mr. Xi, it had been agreed that China would be providing special care and support to Ethiopian students. The Prime Minister hailed China's efforts in containing the new coronavirus. Mr. Xi was quoted by China's state-owned news agency as saying that he appreciated the support African countries had given to China, and Africa had illustrated brotherly friendship since the outbreak began in China at the end of last year. Still on the stories from coronavirus, South Africa sells more than 90% of its lobster catch to China, but exports have been grounded to a halt after the coronavirus outbreak hit demand. This has been a big effect on fishermen who depend on selling the lobsters to make ends meet, and according to many of them, it has been devastating.
The lobster catchers of South Africa's Western Cape have become an unexpected casualty of the coronavirus after China halted imports of the West Coast lobster last month as part of measures to contain the outbreak. The local lobster industry sector has been hit hard by the loss of its major trading partner. Last year, it exported 95% of 1,084 tons of total allowable annual catch to China.
I'm stuck now because they put our catches aside now. The factory don't want to take our fish. There's no market for our fish.
Waiting for the day's catch to arrive at Whitsand's slipway, used mainly by the impoverished Ocean View fishing community, some 40 kilometers from Cape Town, Brown speaks of added hardship, but she has a suggestion for the government.
I think the way forward is the government to give us an extension and to let us catch weekends, and that they can also help us to get the market, to export our fish, because locally want to give us 125 rand a kilo. The market is gave people that caught before the coronavirus, they gave people about 340 rand a kilo. Wow. Now, that is a great amount that I'm going to be lost with.
South Africa, which has no confirmed coronavirus case, has been hit hard by the suspension of lobster exports to China, which last year brought 95% of its total allowable West Coast lobster catch of 1,084 tons.
A military funeral is being held in Egypt for former President Hosni Mubarak. A few dozen supporters gathered outside the Field Marshal Tantawi Mosque in eastern Cairo, where the ceremony is taking place. Mubarak's body will then be transported to his family grave. The 91-year-old man ruled Egypt for 30 years before he was forced out of power by widespread protest in 2011. He spent many of the subsequent years in jail and military hospitals before being freed in 2017.
Mourners embrace each other outside the mosque where he is to be buried, praising Mubarak as a patriot who loves Egypt.
30 years of a great history where he never fell short of anything for the sake of Egypt. He has always been a patriot who loved his country and said he wanted to die here. We are gathered to pay our respects and to restore his dignity after the events of January 25th, 2011.
Top military officials are expected to attend the funeral in an eastern suburb of Cairo, but it's not clear if President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will do so. State television reports that his coffin will be airlifted from the mosque, where the funeral will be held at the burial ground. Israel's Netanyahu paid tribute to former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, calling him a personal friend and a leader who led his nation to peace and security.
On behalf of Israel's citizens and government, I wish to express my deepest sorrow over the passing of President Hosni Mubarak. President Mubarak, a personal friend of mine, was a leader who led his nation to peace and security and peace with Israel.
A partner of the West in fighting Islamists, Mubarak presided over an era of stagnation and repression at home and was an early victim of the Arab Spring revolutions that swept the region. His death has sparked mixed reactions from Egyptians.
We have some good memories. He was a strong president and gave Egypt and the Egyptian people standing in other countries. But we also have some bad memories, including the privatization of public sector companies, the illnesses that spread during his time, and the rampant corruption that took place. Unfortunately, these are the memories that affected his tenure.
Egypt's presidency has declared 3 days of national mourning.
Well, let's get more on today's ceremony. We have now joining us Edward Iranian, the VOA's correspondent in Cairo. Thank you, Edward, for speaking to us. Let me start by asking, what is the mood like today in Cairo, even as Hosni Mubarak is laid to rest?
Old Egyptians are nostalgic, I say. They revere their leaders, even though many people don't actually like them.
All right, Edward, I was trying to ask you what the mood is like today in Cairo in the light of, Hosni Mubarak being laid to rest.
Egyptians, for the most part, older Egyptians are nostalgic, I'd say. A lot of people spoke of him fondly.
All right, we'll have to come back to Edward, but in the meantime, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has taken over key functions of the Nairobi County government in what his office describes as a landmark agreement. The law allows for transfer of functions between the national government and county governments after an agreement. Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko on Tuesday handed over control of transport, health, public works and planning functions. He also signed the agreement in the presence of President Kenyatta at the State House. Governor Sonko is facing corruption charges and has been barred from accessing his office until his case is heard. He is accused of irregularly awarding tenders to his close aides, forging documents, and also misappropriating county funds. However, he's denied any wrongdoing. Right, the UK officially left Europe on January the 31st, but the full implications of Brexit are still unraveling. The British Chamber of Business in Southern Africa held a Brexit panel discussion in Johannesburg, South Africa, where delegates unpacked the implications of Brexit for businesses and emerging economies. Channels TV South African correspondent Katleo Lehodi reports.
UK's exit from the European Union, many say, could be an opportunity for African countries in terms of trade. South Africa remains the UK's leading trade partner in Africa, with the British Chamber of Business estimating that UK-based global companies have created around 250,000 jobs in the country. The British government's target is to double annual exports to £1 trillion British pound and increase the number of UK exporters by 100,000 by 2020. On the 1st of February this year, the Brexit transition period began in earnest, expected to last for about 11 months.
In October last year, the UK and the SACO members, and together with Mozambique, signed what's called an economic partnership agreement. The ambition of that was to ensure a seamless transition from the terms of the EU SADC agreement, which governs terms of trade between the UK or between the EU and SADC countries at the moment, including the UK.
Businesses have raised concerns calling for clear measures on what is to follow.
I was more peculiar into how we as business are going to deal with the future relationship that the UK has with the EU, because we know that with the ratification processes, we don't have March to December. We actually have July to October, if we include the ratification process that UK has to undergo.
Coming back to South African business and specifically the healthcare industry, the impact that Brexit is having on manufacturers wanting to export into the European market and placing a product, and all of a sudden, if you with, for instance, a notified body like BSI, your quality mark, or the way you would call it a CE mark for those of you that don't know, you can't put your product or place your product in the European market.
But the British Chamber of Business has moved to allay fears.
From the panel members, we saw the economic reality which we are navigating. We are not living in easy economic times. However, we can see the opportunities. So with an optimistic attitude, a proactive attitude, and partnering with organizations like the British Chamber, we can enable businesses to grow even in this market.
Export demand and disruption to supply chains between Africa and the UK could be real challenges as post-Brexit becomes a reality. However, British South African businesses remain optimistic that Brexit also stands to offer new export opportunities, not just for South Africa, but partnerships across the African continent. From Sandton, Johannesburg, South Africa, Katleho Lekhodi, Channels Television News.
Voters in parts of Cameroon's restive English-speaking regions are to go to the polls for a second time after the country's Constitutional Council ordered a rerun of the local and parliamentary elections in 11 constituencies. However, the date for this new vote is yet to be set. The ruling, announced on state broadcaster following complaints brought by numerous political parties about the conduct of the polls earlier this month. They cited various reasons, including the distance voters were expected to travel. The vote was boycotted altogether by the MRC party, whose leader, Maurice Kamto, said the Anglophone crisis was a major reason for pulling out. The United Nations says an upsurge in violence has forced at least 8,000 Cameroonians into neighboring Nigeria, in the last few weeks alone. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has donated $10 million to help fight locusts in the East African region. The contribution will be given to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, which appealed for funds to fight the locust invasion that is threatening food security. FAO Director General Q Dongyu has thanked the foundation for its donation and urged other philanthropists to help protect the livelihoods of farmers in the affected region. The UN has so far raised $33 million, which includes the foundation's donation, but says $138 million is needed in total to help fight the locusts. Desert locusts have invaded 6 countries in the East African region, devouring crops, and the invasion is also the worst in 70 years for Kenya and the worst in 25 years for Somalia and Ethiopia. You're watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Still to come on the program. A group of 76 Ethiopian refugees voluntarily returned home from Kenya's Kakuma camp. Please stay with us.